The world is going through changes happening at a speed that we have never seen before. This is leading to disruption, chaos, panic, fear, hysteria, and a turbulent economy and marketplace. How do you protect your wealth in a turbulent world? How do you invest for cash flow in alternative assets to escape the rat race in times of uncertainty? How do you decentralize yourself, family, your community, your business, and your investments to become sovereign and escape the matrix? If you are looking for strategies, tactics, and techniques to escape the rat race and matrix, you are in the right place. My name is MC Lobsher, and this is Cashflow Ninja. This is Cashflow Ninja. I'm MC Lobsher. Thank you so much for joining me and spending your most valuable resource, your time, once again with me on the show. Everything Cashflow Ninja is at cashflowninja.com. We have podcasts, books, reports, webinars, and much, much more. And don't forget to sign up for the #1 newsletter in the alternative wealth strategy and alternative asset investing space, the Wealth Dojo, that gets delivered every single week into your inbox. You can subscribe at cashflowninja.com/subscribe. I've got a fantastic show for you today. I'm joined by Christos Athanasiou. Chris, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Close enough on the name. That's pretty good.
I know. I was just waiting for me to butcher that. So, yeah, appreciate connecting, Chris. And thank you so much for coming on the show. For folks that don't know you and what you do, can you please share a little bit about your background and journey with them?
Sure. Yeah, my background is primarily in architecture, and about 3 to 4 years ago, we pivoted and pretty much switched gears in what we were doing and started to look into the prefab space. The more we kind of looked into it, the more we saw that things were moving towards the direction of like a tiny home, what the potential is there and what you can do with it. And since we have developed a relationship with a European manufacturer that actually sends us kit of parts homes, and now we're working on our own facility here in Westchester, New York, where we can put these together fully prefabricated, drop ship the site in a modular systems or fully prefabbed unit.
So what were some of the things that you saw, the trends? What were some of the markers that made you sit up and say, wow, tiny homes, this is where it's going, and this is really setting up nicely for massive growth in that niche?
I mean, sure, there was some push from the whole like HGTV audience, looking into these tiny homes, but these are like kind of quirky, you open one door and 5 things pop out, like they're meant to be lived in, super tiny space. You can appreciate the kind of amount of work that goes into doing something like that, but do they all need to be that way and fully lived in? Not necessarily, right? So at the same time, prefab industry was just making huge moves, strides forward, and we started looking at the potential of designing essentially getaway homes for New Yorkers. But at the same time, it's when Appendix Q of International Building Code or Residential Building Code was coming into the picture and was being approved in multiple states in the U.S., which was around, I think, in the 2020, and then it was January 1st, 2020, when it started to be adopted here in the U.S., and then March 30, I don't know why I remember the 31st, but March of 2021 is when New York State actually implemented. So, and then all meanwhile, like there's, COVID happened, and then everything kind of changed, right? We kind of pivoted from building getaway homes for New Yorkers, in a sense, smaller, being more affordable, don't need the mansion, don't have to, which speaks to sustainability. You don't have to have those high bills every month maintaining, heating in those homes, etc. what happened with COVID was it made Hudson Valley a global touristic destination. We started seeing even like international flights coming to Stewart Airport, upstate New York. And then there was this kind of boom in terms of building up lodging for that tourism. And for us, it was kind of very easy. It was very easy to kind of adapt a 400 square foot or less tiny home to something that can accommodate or be a hotel suite per se.
Yeah.
So that kind of those were kind of like that kind of push. Like COVID was a huge catalyst for many things, and that was definitely one of them for us.
You know what's interesting? The tiny homes have been around in Europe for quite a while, right? You think Scandinavia, it's tiny homes, for the most part, and Europeans lived outside of their homes anyway. Where America was more like, especially if you get into the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, it's kind of like your McMansions, right?
Right.
Your bigger houses, and everything is bigger. I mean, everything, the cars, the food, portions, the houses, everything. It's interesting because if you would have asked me, I came to the U.S. in around 2001. If you would have asked me then if this kind of like type of, this kind of home would become pretty popular, I'd be like, I don't know. I don't know if it's a fit in America, but things have changed and changed really, really quickly and drastically. And people have adapted to it. And this is extremely popular home right now for many, many different reasons, right? You can even buy large pieces of land, put a tiny home on there. You don't have to have
Well,
this
the tiny
massive
home
house.
subdivision. The tiny home
Yeah,
subdivision.
tiny home subdivisions. Yeah. Please share a little bit more about that. Just the different types you get, the models that you see for that entrepreneurs in this space are employing, and some of the things why they've gotten into the space.
Well, I think it's kind of a big plus for people to kind of, even though, let's say, you go into some kind of quarter acre lot subdivision, right? There's no need for a larger home, 2, 3 stories. You can you can basically give somebody a simpler living condition with their own a space they can call their own little yard space, so to speak. I think you can probably even go smaller than a quarter acre lot. That's kind of the standard, right? In terms of like smaller, 7,500 square feet. But with a tiny home, you can still meet setbacks, side yards, all those zoning regulations more easily, and be able to even take on an even smaller plot, and then there's less maintenance to that. Anybody who has a big yard already knows, the leaves, the gardening, the lawn mowing, the landscapers, there's always something involved. And then, of course, there is a component to this with respect to affordability. And I think that we have to kind of mention that, right? It's important that just because you go small doesn't mean that you're actually spending less dollars per square foot. Typically, smaller means higher dollar per square foot amount. They're actually packing all the home's essentials into something a lot smaller, and you still need the same plumbing, you still need the kitchen, you still need a bathroom, all those things. So the dollar per square foot amount tends to go up for something smaller. But let's say you were able to build one for 200,000 all in. You can sell that tomorrow, and then we're talking about 400 square feet now, right? The staple for a tiny home. And that's one of the rules for tiny homes. It's 400 square feet or less. Another thing I'll mention to speak to that point is that towns, municipalities, they all have very different rule sets about that. So you could go somewhere thinking tiny home, 400 square feet or less, but they could say, well, our town zone ordinance says, 600 square feet is the minimum. And then you have to look at a unit that can meet that minimum size. In terms of the investment side of things, Again, you can easily. That's why there's nothing on the market that's actually modern, that is appealing, that's new, that you could say sell for, that 33 to 50% profit margin. I think there was a listing recently that I saw somewhere. It was a half acre, kind of in the middle of nowhere. It was pretty, but that half acre was cut off by a stream, a creek or something. So you're basically getting even less than that, whatever that half acre is. There's no way to actually cross that creek. And it was a 600 square foot home on it that was selling for 375. So the numbers are, if you multiply it by, 100 on a tiny home subdivision, the numbers are there.
For real estate investors, what type of strategies and approaches have you seen? Have people, because I have seen on Airbnb, people have tiny homes listed for country experiences, for example. Like you were saying, there's a large piece of land with some like a lake to fish on and canoes and all that kind of stuff. And then you throw a tiny home on there and it's almost like a camping experience without a tent. And I'm sure you could throw up a tent next to it too if you wanted to. I've seen strategies like that where folks then buy the land, they buy the tiny home, put it on there, and then list it on Airbnb. What other strategies and approaches have you seen?
I think it's a fairly new space, especially when we're talking about the tiny home as a subdivision. That's one. The other strategies I've seen is actually where there's a lot of like shared economies. Like there was a company out in California that started early on, and California was kind of the trendsetter in the whole tiny home movement as a solution to affordable housing, to basically build up a housing stock, right? The housing crisis is everywhere. Everywhere you ask, you get met with the same answer. We need housing as much as possible. So their solution was the tiny home and building tiny homes in backyards. And what's interesting that's going on there right now, aside from that company that had jump started that, what I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of going back and forth because there's so much information here. They're now allowing, I think one of the cities there that was implementing those tiny home strategies in the backyard ADUs, they're allowing you to sell the ADUs separate from the home. That's pretty interesting. That's never happened before. The company that I was mentioning earlier, they had a model set up where they were doing a shared economies thing where they basically approached the homeowner, said, "We'll build this in your backyard for you. We'll manage it. You can potentially you'll get 50% of the rent roll. That sort of thing, because the land has a much higher value. Let's say in a city in California, in Los Angeles, than it does in, say, upstate New York. So there's some kind of balance there, like value and what the homeowner would get versus what the people who are actually putting in the tiny homes would get. And it's a very broad conversation, like in terms of what can be done in backyards. And right now, I think New York State has actually implemented an affordable housing program where they give out grants to people who would create long-term housing in backyards. But I think that's more of a smaller scale kind of model, right? Like on an individual basis, but not so much for the investor to kind of come in and go into that kind of field. It makes more sense to, just like any other big development, the infrastructure becomes the main issue, and you have to take on a larger parcel in order to subdivide and put these in. And I think we're going to see very soon somebody who's going to suggest, smaller than the minimum lot sizes, and just kind of do these on a more sort of upscale, in a more upscale way. I mean, we've also seen these for housing for veterans, homeless, etc., right? In terms of like these tiny little communities that are being built up. So, but we're talking about something a little different. I think if it's that whole old model, if you build it, they will come, like if you have a community of high-end I want to, I say that when I say high end, I don't necessarily mean like super expensive either. Like high end in terms of like just some nice details, uh, modern, something that actually is appealing to live in. Not the sort of trailer park model, not the sort of like something that's cheaply made. We're talking about like energy efficient cross sections, things that will last through any season, and not kind of like you have to jack up the heat to keep yourself warm in the winter, things like that. I mean, I kind of threw a
Yep.
lot out there. So if there's anything that you want to go back to and that you thought was interesting,
Yeah, this is what I love about real estate, is the creativity, right? It's unlimited. Because if you think about it like real estate, which I always talk about, it has to be approached like a business, because it is a business.
yeah,
You have a product, you have clients, same kind of thing, and it's solving a problem in the marketplace. Now, you have listed so many problems already there that need solving. I mean, the affordability, housing, the affordable housing is like, it's a crisis, which I think we've only scratched the surface. I think it's going to, this is going to be the biggest challenge in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years. If you look
sure,
at the statistics and the numbers, it is shocking
correct,
of where, and I mean, there's so many reasons why, but let's just pick one: the inflation that has happened since 2020. I mean, you kind of print, or not even print, you generate 80% of the money supply in like less than 4 years ever in a country, and just in the United States. Things are going to go up and go up pretty quickly. So you've got that, you've got the affordable housing crisis, which needs solving. Then we have a massive crisis for elder care, for
sure.
our grandparents, right? And people are like, well, we got assisted living facilities and like these assisted living homes and so forth. It's, again, there's not an affordable solution yet for them.
Correct.
So I mean, there are options and charitable kind of charitable homes and living facilities. I get that. Not an affordable solution for them. And then the other thing is, like, you have millennials and the generation below them, and even like Gen Xers, which, the generations above the millennials, people are struggling big time. So they're downsizing. I think they have a completely different mindset than the boomer parents, where I think it's more about experiences than stuff and hoarding stuff and buying big stuff and big cars and as many houses as they possibly can. And now they're just holding on to them. So the housing market stays
Well, that's
stays the
one of
same.
the
Yeah.
beauties of the tiny home, right?
Yes.
Design it. If you have if it's nicely designed, you just have what you need in terms of space. Uh,
Yes.
Pretty much cross generational. It can be a starter home for a small couple. Pre-kids. It can be a place for somebody younger to live in that can be affordable. It can be a smaller space to maintain for someone who's older. So it has many applications, from hospitality, and the Airbnb model, through to, appropriate living condition for different generations.
That's a great point, by the way, because our boomer parents and grandparents and their parents could, back in the day, buy a starter home or a house for 1 year of their salary, basically, right? And now it's not an option. So this is something that, like you just said, that this could be a solution for that. And we're just talking about the challenges and the problems. We haven't even talked about the other side of the business spectrum, where you have pain and pleasure. So there are a ton of challenges and problems to solve at pain, but then there's also like a lot of opportunity on the pleasure side. We have people in our network that have, especially in Latin America, have built tiny home communities, vacation communities,
Yeah.
where people can buy these tiny homes and rent them out to other people that want a vacation around Latin America. There's so many different countries that they have it in. So that's become a pretty popular trend there too. So
for our listeners and viewers on both sides of the spectrum, when you approach real estate as a business, you got to know where you want to operate too. Even if it's just in this one particular niche, there's opportunities on either the pain side that you're trying to solve a pain, or the pleasure, give someone a pleasurable outcome and or experience, right?
Go back to the pain side for a sec. One of the biggest challenges is actually the lack of labor in construction, and that's where it's really helpful to kind of go into to use prefab in that sense, to cut the amount of on-site construction time. The only real way to control costs, because you can go into this with a manufacturer that can basically, especially if you're doing something that's copy paste. A lot of people maybe don't like that, but it's the reality. You would basically you could save. It's not about saving. It's about controlling. I think costs. That once you've set the cost, you know that you can maintain that budget, right? It's not going to be suddenly you're going to get hit with something else. That manufacturing facility is going to supply you with a number, and then that number is based on their current stock. And even if inflation gets worse over the next 6 months, you're still at that number. So because that can kill a project, right? If something happens overnight, things change. That would definitely hurt an investor, force them into a bad position. So I think that's part of what we offer essentially on both sides. Utilizing sort of the best of, in terms of like the panelized system that we get from a European manufacturer. It pretty much meets the standards of like current costs in New York for building, say upstate New York, and you get very well insulated, low energy homes, triple glazed windows and all the bells and whistles that come with the European manufacturing. German standards in terms of like window fabrication, thermal breaks, etc. All that technical stuff that actually makes a home solid. Instead of just kind of like, you're not dealing with like 2x4s, you're dealing with like chunky pieces of wood that are, you get deeper cross sections, and you have to look at all that. Like there's a lot of product out there in prefab that looks really great, when you just look at the cover. But if you really look into what you're buying, you have to pay close attention, because there was one prefab out there that was being sold for $40,000. It was just a steel frame. I'm not going to say by who, but a lot of people have probably seen it before. And somebody sent me the link. Like, look at this. They're all excited, and I said, "Well, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. You have to build this whole thing out yourself." And that's that's where you run into the biggest problems, basically, within construction. People think that they're going to do it on their own, for less, and they're going to do it somehow better. And that's never the case. That
never, ever the case.
Big mistake. And I faced that already with someone where I feel like the whole build out of it was a single unit. It should have probably cost about $50,000 less. But was just he just decided, as a lot of it was going to be a sort of do-it-yourself project, and thought people would save money on it, but it didn't really work out that way.
How do you achieve clarity, certainty, and predictability in a world, economy, and markets that are volatile and chaotic? How do you have confidence in an environment where change and disruption is constant? Setting up infinite banking is how you establish certainty in an uncertain world, predictability in an unpredictable world. With an infinite banking policy, you have your capital warehoused outside of the Wall Street casino, where it is guaranteed never to go down in value, and guaranteed to grow tax-free. You have guaranteed access to your capital, and you also will be able to access your capital tax-free to use to capitalize on opportunities as you come across them. Creating your own banking system with infinite banking can be your secret weapon to protect and grow wealth during turbulent times. You can watch a presentation and explore infinite banking options for you and your family at yourownbankingsystem.com. That's yourownbankingsystem.com. You bring up another great point. And I just want to go back to that to make sure that we reiterate it. That's the other advantage of this prefab, as you said, is that if you're building and you're in construction, and people that have done renovations, that are building houses, they know this. I mean, you never ever get it under your estimate or even close to it, especially now with the materials, right? And especially in the past 4 years, it's been very, very strange. You had massive shortages of stuff and spike in prices, and then you had prices plummet again and come back down, and an oversupply of stuff. And it's like, how do you time this as a general contractor, right? So you had all these moving pieces and variables where in the tiny homes too, again, when you order it from the manufacturer, they have a price based on their inventory, and that's it. It's gonna be easier to plan, and from a budget standpoint. I wanted to ask you, what is kind of the price ranges? So if somebody's listening to this, for example, and go, "This sounds like a pretty interesting idea. I either can use this just on my property, maybe as a place for my parents or visitors or something like that, or from a business perspective, I could find a piece of land that I want, some tiny homes, rent them out on Airbnb. I mean, maybe there's a lot of creativity going right now as people are listening to our conversations, or this conversation rather. What's the price range of tiny homes? Where do they kind of start, and what's kind of the top end of it?
Sure. So I mean, every second conversation I seem to be having, when I mention that what I do to people, they say, "Oh, I've had this idea for a long time. I'm going to buy a small piece of a small property and put like 5, 6 of them on, and my family can come there and do all this stuff, whatever." And then they realize what it actually entails to do it, and it's not so easy. You need the right property, the zoning. You have to go into planning board meetings. This is very time consuming. And
Yep.
this is something that we essentially can offer in terms of like a turnkey and kind of be the boots on the ground and help people with this. In our geographic area at least. Outside of our geographic areas, we're talking about like we would probably just sell the kit of parts if it makes sense to still ship to that, to a part of the country, as a fully prefabricated unit. There would be those additional sort of trucking costs. It might be worth it. It might not be worth it. It really depends on where it's going. But in terms of price, there can be a range on the kit of parts. So we start with the kit of parts, right? And we can do that. The cost can come as low as $120 a square foot. With again, though, it's all the triple glazed windows, roof panels, wall panels, everything basically with the insulation in the cross section. So everything is pre-built from the rough interior all the way to the rough exterior. It comes in the panel. So you're at like 50% completion on basically the overall build out, because you don't have a frame on site. You just kind of, it's like a giant piece of IKEA furniture. You just kind of start stitching it together. You have a house up, a structure up in 2 days. And then you're working on exterior finishes, so which are also included in that cost. And then we're talking on the lower end at 120. On the higher end would be probably 175, 200, depending on the exterior finishes, and if you're ordering just one, of course, right? So on the lower end, it's more negotiable. On the kit of parts side, it just depends how many units you end up ordering, size of the unit, of course, all that, because it comes into play. So it's like it's different. It's going into a manufacturing machine, right? And if you're asking somebody to do 20, now they just have an assembly line built for those 20 units, and they're doing the same thing over and over again, it becomes much easier to do something, a one-off custom piece, let's say. So, on a one-off custom piece, the price range really skyrockets, and I think we're reasonably priced considering where other people are in the industry with respect to prefab and what they're doing versus what we're doing. On the total build side, when we bring it into our facility here and kind of pre-finish the whole thing, a lot of that has to do with the materials that people want for the interior, right? A lot of that is cost driven. How fancy does it get? Do you want simple finishes, simple things, or are they going to get very expensive? So in New York State right now, upstate New York, you're not looking at anything less than $450 a square foot built anyway. Like literally,
gotcha.
That's where everything is. And most contractors won't even take that on because they're getting even higher numbers from fancier homes and things of that nature. That's kind of what's been going on. Like I've even heard like $900 a square foot. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
What are we to talk skyscraper numbers soon? You know what I mean? Like it's a house. So it gets really expensive. And I've seen people back out of deals just because of that. And then we end up speaking to them because we can actually control the cost, like we said, and offer something a little bit different and still maintain the high quality of the product, which is very important, right? It's not about, you can go to somebody right now, you can find something way cheaper through some kind of trailer sort of builder, right? Where you're going to get like a 2x4 wall, you're going to get liner walls in the bathroom, it's not going to be nice. And having said that, it's also a problem for, say, lodging and hospitality industry. I want to make that point because, through my company, through miniMAX, basically, we actually offer custom lodging solutions, which most, if any, I don't think any really do what we do in that space with respect to custom. Anybody will tell you basically nowadays who's in that space that people are looking for unique stays. That's the number one selling point. I think I also want to kind of bring up the point where people are talking about Airbnb being in decline for whatever reason. And my answer to that is, well, there are a lot more nice places to stay at today than there were pre-COVID, and people were able to rent anything during COVID because people were trying to get out of the city. So now if I have a choice between, $200 a night for somebody's moldy room, in their house versus like a really nice place for $500 a night, I'm going to go stay there for $500. I'm not going to go there every weekend. I'm going to spend the money to stay there. And we've seen places open up that are charging $1,000 a night. They're doing phenomenal. So, and that space is kind of still pretty much untapped. These are a handful of places. They're not that many. So I don't know. I don't know. Did I answer the question?
No, you did. You did. It's all, I guess it's all relative. And this is another important lesson for our listeners and viewers. It all depends who your client or customer is. Exactly. So again, you could sell shirts at Nordstrom, you could sell them at Target, and you could sell them at Walmart. You can make money selling shirts at all three of those stores. They all have different price points, right? And they all expect different things. So when you're listening to this, you just have to figure out, okay, who's going to be my customer or my client? Are they going to be kind of on the Nordstrom level, or are they going to be at the Walmart level? And it's not a right or a wrong answer. It's just, who do you want to serve at that point? And it's very, very important to know that, because as you mentioned, the Nordstrom labeled client or customer is going to expect different things and different high-end finishes and, all the other bells and whistles, where your Walmart client or customer is not. So it's going to be a very, very different. So you just need to figure out who you want to serve and who your ideal client or customer is, and you'll be able to incorporate that into a business plan if you're looking to get into the tiny home niche, right?
Yeah, look, if even if you say I'm going to build this 400 square foot unit, for $600 a square foot, it sounds like a crazy number, but it ends up costing you, what is that, 240,000? And then do the math. Do the math on let's say you finance that project and you put 20% down. You put in $50,000. Now you have a note that's like whatever it is, 2,000 a month. I don't know what it ends up being. I'm making up numbers, but you're probably going to make twice that at least on a short-term rental. So you're basically it's a good investment. I mean, now multiply that by 10. You're off to the races. So I mean, I always tell people that, and they're especially people in the space of like larger cities where they're making essentially bad decisions, overpriced markets and stuff like that. It's like your down payment alone is enough to like do two of those out of pocket. I mean, yeah,
Yeah, and that was actually my next question. Financing options for tiny homes.
Mhm.
Can you share what's going on in this niche with financing? Are there options? Are there good options? Or I think that might be something that people would be interested in too.
I mean, if you're borrowing less per home, right, in such a high interest rate market, then you're probably better off for it. It's a regular home. It's considered a stick build, the way we do things. So there's no we don't require any kind of specialized mortgage. Pretty much becomes standard construction loan, like bridge loan, I guess, to to mortgage. So those things are all pretty standard. I mean, completely like bank market driven, interest rate. It's the same across the board. It doesn't really change. I think it only becomes challenging for the types of projects that are considered temporary structures. There you might come into it can get a little tricky maybe for mortgage purposes, but what we do doesn't really come into play. It's pretty much like any other loan.
Gotcha. How does this go wrong? How do people lose money in tiny homes? You've mentioned that people buying them are buying them wrong. They don't know what they're buying, right? They show up with a frame. It's not put together. So that's already one of the ways that this could go wrong.
Yeah, that's you're done. You're over.
Yes, without any carpentry skills at that stage, or even with some, you might be in trouble. What are some of the other ways that this could go wrong?
You're the best carpenter on the planet, and you try to take on doing one of these yourself. If it takes you a year and a half to finish it, you probably just lost 1 year and 3 months worth of rent. So it doesn't make any sense, why you would do something like that.
Yeah.
Unless it's just if you're doing it as a hobby, knock yourself out, But if you're doing it as an investment, it's really like the worst decision you'll ever make. You'll be done just much quicker. No contractor is going to want to be on that project for more than 2 months. They're going to want to knock this out as quick as possible, assuming you can find one. That's basically what we've been trying to resolve over the past 3 to 4 years. Is okay, great. I have a client now in upstate New York. Now I have to train a builder, and it's not that complicated, but it just how you can only spread yourself so thin, right? Like you have to, and a lot of our efforts and why it's taken us as long as it has, and this is a really hard thing to do. People don't realize how difficult it is. When we first started out, we thinking, it's just a small house, what's the big deal? But there's a lot of research and development that goes into it. There's a lot of discussion with manufacturing to try to make sure you get everything right, you meet code. You have to make sure you do all of that, right? So the buying something from China might look amazing, but then you bring it here and you install it, and a buildings inspector shows up and says, well, this doesn't meet the energy code. What do you do now? Now you're scrambling and you're trying to figure out how you're going to add insulation to it. There are a lot of there are a lot of things that go into it, but you always get what you pay for, and if you can, pay the same price you would anything else, but get more for it, you take it.
As with anything, if you do this on the cheap and you try to take shortcuts, you're gonna get your hand spanked. Yeah, one 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 way or another, right? Yeah. This is fascinating. Where can folks learn more about what you do and what you offer in your company, and where can they just follow you and learn more about everything that you're up to and this niche?
So we have, of course, our website, which is miniMAX Living, minimaxliving.com, and that is something that we recently refocused because there was maybe a little too much going on there, and people were kind of like, it's harder for people to wrap their heads around what miniMAX is offering and doing. And right now, miniMAX is completely refocused to offer custom lodging for the hospitality industry. That's primarily what miniMAX is doing. We have a separate company, like a sister company, basically, that's miniMAX Housing. It's just a mirror site at the moment of the old miniMAX site. We're as we speak, somebody's just like changing some stuff for us. We're trying to simplify, and it's hard to simplify because you want to show more, but less is more. So you want to kind of be really kind of focused on your target market. So again, miniMAX is really focused on custom hospitality lodging that we can offer. And it's really more about volume, right? Somebody wants to do 10 units, 20 units. Somebody wants to do one, it's fine, but you're limited to your choices then. Then there's just like the ones that we've already kind of tested, tried, done, that we would, you can pick through that kind of like, I think it's 3 options there at the moment that if you wanted to do less than like 3 units, something fine. And then there's a miniMAX Housing that kind of focuses on the affordable housing component, helping the folks out who are getting grants through New York for the +1 ADU program. And then there's another site that is kind of under construction, so to speak, which is going to be, I think, miniFlex homes, and those are a little bit larger homes, but still in the kind of in the sustainable range, that 1,500 square foot range. We're currently doing 2 projects like for those homes in upstate New York, basically, which will test a lot of what we're saying regarding those, and then having the real thing to show it always helps. So 1,500 square feet, yes, it's larger. It's not a tiny home, but it's still a pretty. I think it's a pretty nice starter home, and I think there's a lot of room for it in housing and in markets that will in even like the 800 to 1,000 square foot, right? There's nothing out there. There's zero inventory. Speaking of problems.
Yeah.
I think if you solve the problem in a meaningful way that makes financial sense, then you'll get the pleasure side of it, right? It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's doing something in Latin America, one of these community housing projects, or something that actually benefits people,
So, Chris, we talk a lot about business, we talk about investing, cash flow, we talk about all that kind of stuff on the show, but we also talk about living and leaving and legacy. So I always ask my first-time guests, if you cannot pass on any money to future generations and you were only allowed to pass on 3 principles and values to them to achieve happiness and success and to build wealth, what would they be?
It's a good question. I would say you'd want to be you focus is probably a big one, right? You want to really kind of know what you're doing. So I did lead with I'm in architecture and all that, and it's like it's been really hard for us to stay on point. We're very creative people. We've come up with a lot of different ideas for how to invest actually with specific sort of business plans on how to invest in these things, which I didn't really get into because then the whole conversation will go into like specific business plans. So
Yep.
People are free to reach out to me if they want to learn more about that. But if you pick something that you choose something that makes you happy, that you like to do, and that basically you stick to it, and follow that path, and don't deviate from the path, because then every time you move off the path, you're just wasting time doing things that you shouldn't be doing. So in terms of, because it's wealth building and happiness and all that, yes. So like it speaks to that, because by focusing, you're not really you're keeping yourself on track. You're not spending time where you shouldn't. Things like that. I think that's that's a big key, especially if you're creative. So it makes it really difficult. I think the second one would be spending time with your family, right? Like you can't just work, because then the time will just go, and then you're just gonna realize that you missed it. So in terms of being happy, I think it's very important. You want to stay on with that. I think those are my two main ones. I don't know if there's a third out there. I don't know. Who says money doesn't buy happiness?
There you go. There you go. Chris, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for coming on the show and providing your insights and your knowledge, and providing just so much value for my listeners and my viewers.
I hope it was. I really do. I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much, MC.
Fantastic. And thank you to all of our listeners and our viewers for, again, spending the most valuable resource, your time, with us on the show today. Everything Cashflow Ninja is at cashflowninja.com. We've got podcasts, books, reports, webinars, and much, much more. And don't forget to sign up for the #1 newsletter in the alternative wealth strategy and alternative asset investing space, the Wealth Dojo, that goes out weekly. It actually comes straight into your inbox. You can go to cashflowninja.com/subscribe to subscribe to that newsletter. Until next time, live infinitely.
This presentation is for educational and informational purposes only. The information being presented and considered does not consider your particular financial objectives or situation, and it does not make personalized recommendations. This material is not intended to replace the advice of a qualified tax and legal advisor or other qualified professionals, and you should not use the information in place of a customized consultation with a licensed professional regarding your specific personal financial objectives, situation, and needs. We believe the information provided is reliable, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, timeliness, or completeness.